No, this is fun because I actually think Matt will probably chime in a little bit on this one because when he was presenting this last week, his laptop took a dive on him and he just pretty much had to go from memory. And he said he had one of the best times just riffing when he was on stage and it went really well. So chime in as
Yeah.
much and as frequently as you want because you had a good time
Well, look,
last time.
here's the thing. Here's the thing, Brett. I have fought myself from chiming in over and over and over just because of the restrictions. And I know
Right.
that you got this down to like 22, 23 minutes. So every time that I say something, it puts us behind schedule. So I am willing to riff on anything. You guys take notes, and in the last class, shoot, we can talk for hours.
Yep.
So that's good. Anyway, I'll turn it over to you. Thanks,
So,
Brett.
just generally, what makes them different, how chemistry can cause issues for covered pools, and maintenance tips and tricks. So, a lot of this, you're going to notice similar trends with things that we've talked about prior, because uh, think about if you can have chemical issues in a pool that's open and able to gas off and everything like that, put a Tupperware lid on top of it. You can still have problems, and they could potentially be more concentrated. So, some of the good parts about covered pools can actually be detrimental if you aren't taking care of your chemistry the proper way, which is why we really wanted to talk to installers of these, like going out to these cover seminars and just to make sure they know. Because a lot of times, if they're builders and they don't care about the service afterwards, they may not be expressing the importance of this to the homeowner, and it could make problems for y'all at the retail shops too. If they come in and say, "Well, my builder never told me to do that," well, maybe didn't tell you enough. So uncovered systems, they're open. Contaminants can get in easily. Think about leaves falling, getting right into a pool that's uncovered. Chemicals can quickly gas off. You could put a bunch of chlorine in a pool at the start of the day, and at the end of the day, without a cover or without cyanuric acid, you could have nothing. It can burn off that fast. Heat radiates off the water. People like a warm pool, probably warmer than they should. We'll talk about that. And gases leave the water freely. So we were talking about combined chlorine and other gases. As stuff gets broken down, it's freely able to gas off and leave the water. If there's a breeze, it blows it away. Awesome. That makes it even better. Covered, it's the opposite of what I just said. It's better at keeping contaminants out. So the leaves hit the cover, they just blow off. Who cares? That's awesome. Prolongs the chemical life. So you've got your Tupperware lid on there. There's less junk getting in there that can cause contamination. You don't need as many chemicals. How about that? Keeps heat in the water. We like a warm pool. So lock that heat down. And gases, this one could be a negative. They're trapped if not vented. So when I've said burping the cover or opening the cover up every day, that's to let these gases have a chance to actually leave because you don't want to trap them under there. Generally, you should do it every day, at least for, what would you say, Matt? 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes? Just give it a chance to breathe. He's nodding his head. We'll say that.
Hey, no, as long as you can, right?
As long as you
The
can,
problem
but
is
at
that
least
people, yeah. Well, the problem is that people are so worried about stuff happening around their pool that they'll sit there and watch it. They'll think it's 10 minutes, but it's really been like 2 minutes, and then they'll close it because they have other stuff to do, right?
Yep. So you've got an auto covered pool, less junk getting in, less chemical demand, less heat loss, and less water loss. So some very good points for wanting an auto cover. Why we need to make sure the chemicals are in check so that we don't end up hurting our pretty new auto cover. So the harmful chemical and gases, they can get trapped under there. Bad water quality and balance can actually cause premature wear and tear. Harmful heat, that's kind of a fun one that not a lot of people think about. And saltwater issues, because a lot of the issues that we're talking about kind of get bundled all together when you put a salt system on and then put a cover on the pool. Not saying salt systems are bad, just saying you've got to take a little extra care when you've got a salt pool that's auto covered. So the
You know, I
harmful
didn't
gas.
I didn't even really think about that, about how the heat affects everything underneath the cover until
Yep.
about a year ago. I mean, I just didn't even think about it.
It's wild.
But
And,
now,
even talk
yeah.
to, if you do vinyl liners, talk to the vinyl liner manufacturers too, because they'll tell you, I mean, there's a reason you don't see a lot of or really many, if any, vinyl lined hot tubs. Huh? There's a reason. So tabs. We already talked about this. Low pH. They can make the water acidic. Acidic water can be bad for vinyl. The auto covers are generally made out of vinyl. Liquid shock, high pH. This can cause scale to form on the pool surfaces, pieces of equipment, everything under there. Granular shock, also high pH. Salt generation, this is kind of a perfect storm because you can have high levels of chlorine if your salt cells. Think about a salt system. You're generating chlorine. You're trying to hit a certain number. Generally, they're off of percentages. So you're running at 50%. Awesome. In an uncovered pool, that may be perfectly fine because you're gassing off some. In a covered pool, you've trapped it in, so you don't need as much chlorine. You could probably turn your salt cell down because you don't need to make as much chlorine. But a lot of homeowners think, I got a salt system. I'm just going to turn that thing on and walk away. Well, what they're doing is they're making the chlorine really, really high, which is damaging to everything the water's touching. They're also making the pH very, very high, which is making the chlorine that they're generating not effective. So that could be a problem too. And they're also making the water scale forming, which could cause the fun. I got to think of a better term for it, but I keep thinking like salt cell dandruff, where you'll see the little flakes coming out of the return. They usually hang out under the return. That's usually scale forming from phosphates, carbonates, or
Sulfates.
Sulfates. Thank you. Any type of chlorine, you're creating gas. If it can't go anywhere, it's just hanging out and chlorine gassing all over everything it can. Other harmful chemicals and gases, chlorine byproducts. Now we've kind of beat this horse pretty. It's dead. Like that horse ain't getting up. Chlorine byproducts. It's chlorine that's got used up. It's combined. It's hopefully trying to gas off so it can leave the water. But if you've got a lid on the Tupperware, it can't gas off. It's just hanging out under there. So it's an aggressive gas. So it can cause premature wear on metal surfaces. So the tracks that hold the auto cover in place, those can start to get pitted. Actually pretty quickly if you've got really high levels under the cover and you don't ever burp it. If you've ever walked into a hotel lobby and you immediately smell chlorine and you're like, oh, there's a pool here. That pool probably isn't running well because that chlorine smell is actually chloramine. That's what you don't want to smell. A properly run and maintained pool, you shouldn't smell anything. It's heavier than air, so it sits on the surface of the water. So if it's sitting on the surface and you got a lid on it, it's just building and building and building and building and concentrating, and more concentration equals more damage. Ozone, this one's not quite as big a deal, but it is something to be aware of because if you install an ozonator that doesn't have like a degas vessel or anything like that, the half-life of ozone, it breaks down pretty quick. But if you've got an auto-covered pool, think of it like a hot tub. Because a lot of hot tubs have ozonators on them. And if you don't open the lid on your hot tub, you can actually build up a little bit of ozone gas under there. And that gas is actually what's oxidizing the spa pillows. So if you ever get those spa pillows that get that kind of that hazy look to them, that's the ozone doing work on the vinyl of the spa pillow. That same kind of chemical reaction can happen in a covered pool. So vinyl auto cover, vinyl liner maybe, you could potentially be breaking that stuff down with the excess of ozone built up under there. So it's not as big a concern, but it is something that could happen if you've got an ozonator on there.
Well, I think that the ozone gas off mixed with some of the other stuff you're going to talk about, like the heat and everything else.
Yep.
That's like a perfect, or it can be a perfect storm. And it's not that we're against ozone. We're not. I mean, my spa has an ozonator on it right now, so it's not like any one of us here at API are anti-ozone. It's just one of those things to think about because when people come in and complain about something, you have to consider all the possibilities, right? So,
water quality and balance. So, different water balance factors can directly impact the longevity of your equipment. We've said that multiple times here today as well. If your pH is low, that's kind of a fun one because if your pH is low, it actually causes the pores of the vinyl to open up. And if the pores of the vinyl can open up and you've got other chemical issues going on in the water, it's allowing those issues to more readily enter the pore of the vinyl, which can cause premature wear and tear. So let's stack this. So if we've got low pH and we've got high heat, if you've got high heat, vinyl can stretch. If it stretches, the pores are opening even more. So low pH, high heat, and let's say we've got high chlorine. Well, the high chlorine can get into the pores and actually prematurely break down the elasticizers, which hold the vinyl taut. And so it can get really loose quicker than it should. All these things stack on top of each other. So if you let one thing get out of whack, it's maybe not that big a deal. You let two things get out of whack, oh my gosh, this is even worse. Three things, oh my God, we got to replace it next year. It can happen fast too, because I've seen heater heads solid cupro-nickel heater heads that were cached after 2 weeks of improperly balanced pool water. Not terribly common, but it can happen if you run it that far out of whack. So everything the water touches
but my chlorine, right?
yeah.
But here's the thing, though. I mean, you keep saying vinyl, and I understand that because you're in a heavy vinyl area. But also think about one of the trends is fiberglass. And most of the fiberglass manufacturers now want you to have lower calcium, and it's for the same reason, because what ends up happening is that the fiberglass shell can actually absorb some of that when things are out of balance. And so the lower your calcium is, the less chance the calcium will get into the fiberglass surface. And because if it does, if any of these other factors that we're talking about actually make it so they want to absorb the calcium goes behind the gel coat and you get waffling, right? And so if you get that, it's not like it's just as easy, it's super easy to change the skin of a fiberglass pool like it is a vinyl. I mean, it's super expensive. But if that happens, I mean, it's literally like thousands of dollars in sandblasting and all kinds of stuff, which is horrendous. So again, when you talk about a covered pool, it's not just vinyl that we're worried about. It's really all of them.
No, and good point. And just so people know, the fabrics that are on most auto covers are actually a vinyl. So it's not just vinyl pool surfaces that this could affect. It can prematurely wear down the actual auto cover, so causing its own demise if your chemistry is out of whack. Unbalanced water, and this is real generic. This could be either high or low. It could be cloudy. It could be corrosive. It could be scale. It could have increased chemical costs because if you're out of balance, your chemicals aren't working as hard for you as they could. Equipment problems, ineffective sanitizers, issues for swimmers. And again, we have pools to swim in them. If it's not comfortable and you always get red eyes when you come out of there, you're probably not going to swim as often as you'd like. Balanced water, the complete opposite. It's awesome. You want balanced water. Everything works better for you and your pool lasts longer. Harmful water balance. Corrosive, it breaks it down. Corrosive water. Think of it, corrosive, it's aggressive. It's aggressive water. It's going to beat you up and take your stuff. So aggressive water, it beats up the metal in your pool heater and it pulls the metal out. It opens up the pores in your vinyl and starts to break stuff down in there. It's going to take what it wants. Water is the universal solvent. Give it enough time, it'll break everything down. If it's aggressive, it's got brass knuckles. It can take it down a lot faster. Scale forming is the exact opposite. It's really giving. It's really happy. It wants to give. It's got so much stuff in the water that it wants to give, and it's going to give until it puts scale all over every surface of the pool. This is that's not your impeller, Austin. This again, another salt cell, out of balance. But like we said, salt can be its own worst enemy and its own best friend. What you got, Matt?
I'm just telling Austin, nice try.
Oh.
Keep going.
Harmful heat. So this one's kind of a different one too. Heat's a factor in water balance. Why is that, Matt? I want some Matt flavor on this one. Saturation index? What's hot water do?
Saturation index. And then also really the biggest thing would be calcium, because the warmer the pool is, the more apt the calcium is to come out of solution, where the colder is, the more apt it is to stay in solution. And that's different than most other minerals that are available in the water, right? Most of them want to stay in the solution the warmer the water gets and then come out when it's colder, but calcium's the opposite. And we've been talking about calcium over and over and over this morning about there's good things about it. Calcium chloride is actually a good thing to have in your water because it helps to prolong the life of everything the water touches, because it actually puts a protective coating of scale on everything the water touches. But calcium carbonate, which is why we are kind of harping on or hyping up Revive, because Revive takes out carbonates. And calcium carbonate is the stuff that wants to come out of solution. It wants to cause haziness. It wants to cause scale. It's the stuff that's the first stuff to form on the inside of a chlorine generator cell. All that stuff is like Brett said, if the water's warm, it's giving, and the first thing it gives is a calcium-based something, whether it's phosphate, sulfate, or carbonate or chloride.
And the going to jump off of what Matt's saying there, where high heat happens is where that stuff likes to drop out. So it's about 130 degrees inside a salt cell when it's running. So it's more apt to create this stuff. So that's why you'll see the salt cell dandruff that comes out of the returns that settles right on the ground. That's why your heater heads, if you're out of balance, it can look this impacted with just junk that's built up in there, because it's really hot, it's causing that stuff to drop out. So if you're running your water colder, it means your pool, it would actually be a little bit more acidic and preventing scale formation, because it's actually going to absorb that calcium instead of depositing it on surfaces. Water balance and saturation index, that's a whole other training. If you want, shoot us an email afterwards. We can touch base on that one, because that's a fun topic too. But the different things that we talked about, they all play off of each other. So harmful heat, again, this is a vinyl line pool, like that little tongue that's on that tanning ledge. If you think about tanning ledges, you only have about 4 or 5 inches of water on them in some cases. So that water can actually heat up faster than the rest of the pool, because a lot of people aren't putting returns on the back end. So you don't get water moving across the top. So it doesn't equalize as much. You put a cover on top of that as well, and that can actually cause the vinyl, the excess heat causes it to stretch. And when it stretches, it doesn't have anywhere else to go. So the vinyl goes up like that. And that's why you get your tongue on the edge of your tanning ledge or your step. If you put in other factors like low pH that's already causing issues with the vinyl, or high chlorine that's breaking down the elasticizers, you could have some really serious issues that happen relatively quickly, all from things that you wouldn't have even thought about. So heat, I tell people generally 86, that's about all a warmer a pool should be. I know a lot of people don't like that because they want to run it at 100 and some odd. And if you're running in an area where it's just ripping hot, sometimes it's not an easy option to obtain. I've got a cheap trick that you could do, and then I've got a really expensive option that you can make a lot of money selling stuff. So the cheap trick, get one of those stupid daisies that actually screws into the return fitting, and spray water over the surface of the pool at nighttime. I have your cover open
Don't call them
too.
stupid daisies. Everyone here probably sells them.
Wasn't that the
Get
brand
one
name?
of those What's that?
I have a beef because I had one that broke, and I'm salty. I just need to buy another one. But essentially, the water spraying over the surface, it can actually cool it a couple degrees every night and keep it in check. Or if you want to go the more expensive route, because retailers, service companies, we want to make money, sell them a heat cool pump. That's pretty cool. You can say, hey, I can keep it as warm as you want, and I can actually cool it off so it keeps everything better and running nicer. What's Austin sending? We got fun pictures in the chat. We'll look at that here in a second. Salt systems. So I said they're kind of their own worst enemy and their own best friend, and that's very much a case in covered pools, because overfeeding. You don't need as much. So salt systems need to be turned down in most salt pools. Harmful gases. It's creating gas all the time it's running. Water balance, it's making your water less balanced because it's making sodium hydroxide, which makes your pH go up, which makes your chlorine less effective, which means it's not working for you. Harmful heat, it's also very hot inside the salt cell, about 130 degrees while it's running. So it's creating scale actively, which causes itself to scale up. So all of those things stack on top of each other. And you're doing it in a Tupperware now. So it's all concentrated in there, wearing down everything that the water and the gases touch. So maintenance tips and tricks. Follow the cover directions. That's a big one. And working with different manufacturers, a lot of them have said when people go out and install fiberglass pool, a vinyl liner, an auto cover, a lot of times the directions and the maintenance don't end up in the hands of the homeowner. Make sure they get those. Make sure they read them too, because there's really good tips in there on how they can keep their stuff working better longer. Open the cover to vent frequently. That's the biggest one. Open it, gas off, let it breathe. Give it a chance to breathe. It really wants to. Test your water frequently. That's going back to what we talked about earlier. Frequently and often. If you've got a good baseline of what's going on in your water, you kind of get to see, this is what I can expect on a daily basis or on a weekly basis, and you dial your pool in essentially where you can almost get it on autopilot. Keep sanitizers in proper range, or keep all your chemicals in proper range. So we've already talked about why you don't want to be really, really high on your sanitizers, but water balance is a big one too. And it's not just a buzzword. It's not, well, my water's balanced, or when we take a tech call and, hey, what are the readings? Well, everything's in range. My response to that is highs are range and lows are range. I need numbers so we can actually diagnose what's going on here. And temperatures. Try and keep the temperatures in check. A couple other maintenance tips and tricks. Use less chlorine. We talked about that on the last one. Alternate chemical programs. Programs that maintain water quality and balance. Keep all your pool systems working better and longer. So pepper, I talked about salt systems. You typically on a pepper pool, after about 2 weeks of use, you can adjust it down by about 20%, your salt cell. So it's running less. So the negative consequences of the salt cell running get minimized. You're generating less scale. You're generating less sodium hydroxide. You need less acid to maintain the pool. You need your salt cell runs longer. The benefits can stack too if you take care of things the right way, just as fast as the negatives. Easier to surface. Turn your salts on. Yeah, and don't ever shock the pool with a chlorine product and close the cover. That's a surefire way to. It's a bad time. It's probably the best way to say it. If it's too hot, turn it down. Like I said before, you can do your daisies or your heat cool pumps. Mid 80s, kind of safe. Covered pools hold heat better. So if you've got a really dark auto cover, that can actually collect heat faster than a tan colored auto cover because darker colors hold heat. So you could actually be cooking. Because if you think about an auto cover, there's usually a gap on the edges where you've got an air pocket, and that air pocket can just be cooking under there. That could be really, really hot and causing premature wear and tear. Again, burp your cover. Open it up, let it breathe. Ezine Pro is kind of a fun one because, like we said, it's very, very versatile product. You can use it for 20 different things, mainly in terms of keeping it clean. If you keep your auto cover clean, it works better longer, it performs better, it doesn't break down as fast. Clean it as often as you can. Organic stains and oils in check. Ezine Pro actually helps to break down organics that are in the water. You can actually use it as a cover cleaner. So shoot a couple ounces on it, spray it with water, scrub it with your pool brush, roll it back up, and just let it sit in the box. The enzymes, if you roll it up, you're actually treating the top of the cover and the underside because as you're rolling it, it's hitting both sides. Because it's a natural enzyme, it's not going to damage the cover or anything like that. And if you get some in the pool, that's awesome. Enzymes are great in the pool. Rinse it often, compatible products. Make sure you're taking care of it the right way because there are certain cover cleaners out there that are alcohol based that can prematurely wear them out. You want to make sure you're working with compatible products with whatever you're playing with, really. There's that. Matt, did you have any other fun fun things you wanted to throw in
Yeah.
from CoverCon?
Thanks for throwing it to me. I wanted to cover a couple things that we're talking about in the chat. Joshua L asked, how long should you keep the cover open to gas off before you close it back up? And so I said, look, the best case scenario is as long as they can stand to leave it open up to like 2 or 3 hours, but at least 15 to 30 minutes. But here's the problem. The problem is that if you say to someone, hey, I want you to, you need to keep it open as long as you're comfortable is the probably the correct answer. Just because with the way that things with liability are going nowadays, if you say to someone, or if you're someone that goes out and does weekly service and you leave the cover open and something happens, you're liable for what happens because the homeowner is always going to say, well, I would have closed it, right? So the answer to your question is kind of problematic, Josh, is that, if it's a homeowner doing their own thing, yeah, I mean, 15 to 30 minutes is the bare minimum they should keep it open, but they should really probably keep it open for an hour or 2 or 3, depending on what they're doing, especially if they're shocking the pool or something like that. But you don't really want to put yourself out there enough to say, well, you must keep it open for 3 hours. You say, well, we recommend a couple hours, and as long as you're watching it, because obviously people that put these on put it on for a reason. People with small kids will put it on because they have small kids and they don't want anything to happen to them. Or people out west would do it for that, but also for evaporation and everything else. So it really comes down to the certain situation. So it's one of those things, like 15 to 30 minutes at the very least. But if you're going to be out there, you're going to be watching the pool, it'd be better if it was an hour. If you can if you can do that, as long as you're paying attention to the pool.
And if you're already working with auto cover companies, check with them. Say, what do you recommend for a runtime? How often should I have these open? Because they might have slightly different guidelines based on the make, because they all have their own unique flavor. It couldn't hurt to check with them, but like what Matt was saying, where they're comfortable and where it's safe.
I would think, and I'm talking out of turn here because I don't work for a cover company, but you would think the cover companies probably say, well, keep it open as long as possible, right? Because they don't want any kind of gas, formation or
Right.
concentration underneath covers. So that's, but you still have to worry about what did you say, right? So that's kind of where I'm at,
That's
because
a
there's
little bit of
all kinds of people.
CYA, and we're not talking stabilizer.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. And then Brick asked about removing salt from pools. The only real way to take it out is to drain water out and then refill the pool. But keep in mind what the salt reading is of the fill water coming in, especially if you're wherever. Just make sure that you test that. Now out west, I don't know if anyone here is from out west, but they actually have companies now that bring an RO truck to your house, and they run the pool through the reverse osmosis truck and then put it back in. So that is something that's going on right now. It typically takes a day and a half to 2 days, from what I've been told. But that's really the only way to do it. And frankly, I'm not even sure that you can take the salt out that way or not, right?
Well, wouldn't that
I'm
strip
thinking with
all of
RO
the
you can,
minerals? Like that would take out
but you're thinking it'll
calcium,
strip all the
cyanuric
minerals out.
acid, everything.
Yeah, and the follow-up question to that is how high of a ppm of salt should you consider to take some of the water out? Now, it really depends on the manufacturer of the chlorine generator.
Yep.
Most chlorine generators want you to be anywhere between 2,800 and like 3,500, 3,600. There's one or two manufacturers that can handle up to 4,000 or 5,000 parts per million. But I would say if you're getting into the 6 and higher, or if someone's complaining about being able to taste the salt, they're not supposed to be able to taste the salt unless it gets to, like, I think it's 8 or 10,000, Brett, if you remember. It's something really high. But the problem is that if people know that you have a salt pool, they're going to think in their head that they can taste the salt, right?
Yeah.
So it really comes down to the individual person and the manufacturer's guidelines. But most of the time, it's anything above 4,000, unless they specifically say they can handle up to 4,000, 4,500, or 5,000 parts per million. Okay, hope that answers your question.